Recording in progress.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to give it a couple more minutes while people are signing on, and then we will get started. Okay. I'm going to kick us off here. My name is Angelica, and I am the Director of Membership and Community Engagement here at the Chamber. Thank you so much for joining us for one of our business education series today. I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, who's Dr. Skylar Place. He is an expert in behavior change and has leveraged his perspective to help Fortune 100 clients unlock the power of AI to improve outcomes for their businesses, customers, and employees. I'll let him introduce himself further, but just some housekeeping items for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them throughout. We want this to be really engaging. We want you to use real life scenarios from your businesses. So please feel free to do those things. If you have questions, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen and try not to use the chat feature, as that is typically a little more challenging to navigate. And finally, I want to thank our sponsors who make this event possible. And so I want to start off by thanking the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, Air Academy Credit Union, UC Health, Yampa Valley Medical Center, Northwest Data Services, and our presenting sponsor, Mountain Valley Bank. And with that, Skylar, I will kick it off to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. So what I want to do today in the next hour is spend some time talking about the practical use cases of artificial intelligence. And I know we've all probably heard a lot in the last 18 months or so around AI. It's become a very hot topic. But what I want to do is demystify that a little bit and share some of the practical realities of how this technology works and how it can help you in your role at work and with your companies across the Valley today. So this is a presentation I've done in a variety of formats. I'm used to doing this in person. So please feel free to interrupt me, ask questions. I can't see the Q&A, but if you put things in there, we'll get them read out. But please feel free, if you can, come off mute and just literally be interactive. That would be, I think, best for everyone. So as you heard, I'm Skylar. I live here in Steamboat. I run a boutique consulting business focused on helping organizations derive value from artificial intelligence. I lecture at Harvard occasionally, and I have a diverse background in startups and technology. And I have two little boys. So what I wanted to do was to start with a few quotes just to ground us around a shared idea of what artificial intelligence can be. So to start, this is one of my favorites. So once the computers got control, we might never get it back. We would survive at their sufferance. If we're lucky, they might decide to keep us as pets. And when a lot of us think about artificial intelligence, this is probably where our mind goes first. This kind of dystopian future where AI is a menace, it's out of Terminator, and it is a world where we should be fearful of what AI can do. And this is a quote actually from 1970, so over 50 years ago, from Marvin Minsky, who's one of the original creators of artificial intelligence. He founded the artificial intelligence program at MIT in Boston. And he was also the scientific advisor for Stanley Kubrick for 2001: A Space Odyssey. So you can get a feeling from the very, very beginning, there was this deep-rooted sort of science fiction fear of what AI could be. As we move forward, people started to think really about not just AI as a source of fear, but as a source of competition, right? So this quote, by 2029, computers will have human-level intelligence, whatever human-level intelligence means. And this is a quote from about 15 years ago, so much more recent. And this is from Ray Kurzweil, who is famous for predicting, sometimes correctly, sometimes incorrectly, what the future will hold as it relates to a whole variety of technologies. Ray has written a variety of books. He's now a senior research fellow at Google, helping them try to predict the future. So once again, something I'm not particularly concerned about in terms of AI reaching human-level intelligence anytime soon, but is something that is definitely top of mind in many of the thought leaders in the space. And then lastly, your children. Literally, they'll probably be working 3.5 days a week. And not working 3.5 days a week because that generation is viewed as lazy, but because AI is going to make their job so easy that they're only going to have to be, putting in 3 days a week and then skiing the rest of the time, right? And this is a quote from Jamie Dimon, and this is from a year ago, and he's talking specifically about the ChatGPT revolution, right? And what has changed in the last 18 months or so with the rise of generative AI. And Jamie Dimon's the CEO of Chase Citibank, one of the largest and most powerful banks in the world. And he's really thinking about how AI is going to influence the workplace. And I wanted to share these quotes because I think we all come from a different set of assumptions and different sort of perspectives on what AI is, what it could be. And most of our knowledge and experience comes from the movies, it comes from the headlines of the New York Times and Fox News. And what I really want to focus on today is not the what if and the what could be and are we all going to become pets to our iPhones, but instead focus on the practical, right? What can you be doing today? My goal in the next 45 minutes is for you to be able to walk out of here with some tangible actions that you can take today to try to use AI in your business. Some of you may be very familiar with ChatGPT. Some of you may have never heard of it. But my goal is by the end of this conversation that all of you have the comfort and the confidence to take, at the very least, the first step in thinking about how to use this technology in your business. And if you, like I said, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, please come off mute and share with us. So, like I said, I want to focus on the practical. That's really the goal for today. Thinking about what AI is, how it works, how it's changing the business and business world today, and what can we do and what can you do to empower yourself and your businesses going forward. So to start, I wanted to just share 2 minutes of history to help explain why things are changing now, right? Why is it the quote unquote, golden age of artificial intelligence? What has happened in the last 2 years that's really altered the landscape and brought some of this technology to the forefront of a lot of our minds? So when we think about kind of the history of AI since 1970, I think there's really 5 major milestones that I want to share. So the first is the initial research, the kind of laboratory science around artificial intelligence came from the philosophical idea of building a computer that could work in the same way as the human mind and as the mind of any other living creature. And this was the idea of neural networks, or the idea of building a simulation of the network connections of the neurons that exist in our brain. And while this was philosophically and mathematically a very interesting idea, the technology in the 70s and 80s was nowhere near powerful enough. Computers were not powerful enough to be able to simulate the number of neurons and the number of connections between neurons that exist in our brain. So while our brain may have billions of neurons and trillions of connections, these early neural networks had 10 neurons and maybe 100 connections. And from that, you could see the potential, and people like Marvin Minsky could hypothesize about the future, but they weren't practical in terms of any kind of business application. So in the 80s and 90s, the technology and the kind of research on AI went in a very different direction, and instead focused on rule-based AI. So instead of thinking about building a machine that worked in the way that a human does, instead we focused on if-then statements. If you see this condition, then take this action. And this became sort of the idea of business automation software, which became very popular and very powerful in very specific use cases. So these quote unquote AI models were valuable if you had every situation mapped out. So you may have thousands of rules or tens of thousands of rules, but the computers were only as smart as the programming or the very specific sets of directions that they were given. What happened in sort of 2010 to 2020 was a massive increase in computing power. So this is sort of the advent of cloud computing and the advent of the GPU, or the idea of a type of chip that was specifically designed to do the kind of math that is required for building neural networks at scale. It turns out this is the same kind of math that powers video games. So if you have kids or you yourself are a gamer, you may be deeply intimate with the idea of GPUs or video cards and the power of a video card to get very, very high quality graphics for your games. That vector-based computing is exactly what's required for neural networks to be developed at scale. And that's why companies like NVIDIA, which you may have heard of, which in the 90s and 2000s and 2010s, were really focused on providing hardware to support video gamers, are now one of the most valuable companies in the world because their technology and their computer chips power the cloud computing and the supercomputers that allow the modern artificial intelligence solutions to be successful. And then the last missing piece here is the internet, very broadly. And what this really represents is the digitization of basically every written word in the history of humanity. And when you think about having the data to train a very, very large model, then the internet becomes a very powerful source of information. When you have, every Wikipedia, you have dictionaries, you have every medical journal ever published, you have the complete history of every newspaper, you have Reddit and TikTok and Twitter and all these social media histories that can be utilized to build a data source for these intelligences. And then you have the combination of really these 4 steps getting us to the idea of the large language models, which are the basis behind every artificial intelligence solution that you're hearing about on the market today. So whether it's ChatGPT or the work from Bard and Gemini coming out of Google, or what Apple is doing to try to catch up, or Meta, or whatever project Elon Musk is working on, all of them are using the same underlying mathematical artificial intelligence, which is an LLM, or a large language model. So very briefly, what an LLM is, it's an abbreviation, it's got 3 parts. The The math is extraordinarily complex. It's way above my pay grade, but for this audience and for 99% of us, there's really only 4 things you need to know. So here are the first 3. An LLM stands for large language model. Large meaning it's trained from basically the entire internet. Every document, every word that exists on the internet. The second is that it's focused on language. So it's looking at text, and it can look at text across different languages. It can now convert video and images to text, but the core idea here is it's looking at words. And the third component is it's a model, right? It's a trained representation and it's saved. So once you have one of these, you can ask it questions like ChatGPT. And the fourth thing, which is kind of the what does all the math boil down to? What are these really doing? It's actually really, really simple at the end of the day. The way that these models work, they're only trying to do one thing, which is they're trying to predict the next word. So if you say, Mary had a little lamb, that's what it's trying to do. So imagine that kind of intelligence across every sentence that has ever existed in the history of our culture and of humanity. Unbelievably powerful, but also unbelievably naive, right? No sense of right or wrong, no sense of good or evil, no sense of intentionality or how someone might feel by what the next word means. It has no grounding in ethics. It has no grounding in politics or religion or morality or business appropriateness. The only thing the model is trying to do is to predict what is the next most likely word to appear in a sequence. So what this means is you have a system that can create very naturally sounding human text. It can write paragraphs. It can respond in a way that makes you feel like there's a lot of intelligence behind it. But at the end of the day, it's really important to remember the only thing the math is trying to do is to predict the next most likely word to appear in a sequence. So let's run through a toy example here, just so we all can get a feel for what this looks like. So if you've never used or seen one of these large LLMs before, I want to give you a sense. So today we're going to be focusing on ChatGPT. Effectively, in my opinion, these tools are more or less the same. They are starting to diverge, but for 99% of the use cases for businesses today, you can pick whichever one you're most comfortable with or whichever one your company is already associated with. So if you're using Microsoft products, you may want to use ChatGPT integrated into Microsoft Office. If your organization uses Google Cloud, Google has Bard, they're all roughly the same. So with these systems, what you do is you simply you talk to it or you type to it and you ask it a question. So if we start with something very simple like let's see, can you please describe Steamboat Springs, Colorado in 300 words? So off it goes. And what you'll see is it generates very real sounding sentences, right? And it will give you an overview. It acts pretty quickly, and it does a pretty good job of describing Steamboat. And this is where things start to get fun and interesting because you can then continue the conversation and start to ask it to talk in a different voice. So I gave a version of this presentation to high school sophomores back in the fall. And what we did is we said, okay, so give me the same overview, but sound like a 15-year-old high school student. And remember, it's read the entire internet, right? So it knows, or it thinks it knows, how a 15-year-old talks. Okay, so we're getting, a little more casual sounding, super cool mountain town tucked away in the Rockies. My kids are much younger, so some of you may have high school students. This may be what high school students sound like. Similarly, very easily, we can just say, please give me the same overview, but in Spanish, right? So it's not exclusively to English. So it will just very happily give you the same overview. And remember, it is trying to predict the most likely next word. That is all it's trying to do. Which means if you ask it the same thing twice, you probably won't get the same response because this system is not following rules. It's following the probability based on what it thinks is the opportunity to be able to give you an answer that it thinks is most likely. So this, you can imagine, becomes very, very powerful to start generating text or start generating recommendations, start drafting documents, a whole variety of use cases. But there's a couple of gotchas that I want to share. So if we flip back to the presentation, these are just the same things. So what I did a few weeks ago is I asked ChatGPT to give me a list of farm-to-table restaurants in Steamboat Springs. So a pretty specific ask. And it came up with 6. So we have Hartwig's, Orem, Table 79, Laundry, Farm Stand, and Creekside. And typically, if this was a more interactive session, then I would ask you guys, which of these have you eaten at? Which ones do you enjoy? Which ones do you think have the best farm-to-table food? And what usually happens is that folks, have opinions on the Laundry versus Table 79, and they wish Hartwig's was still open more often. And then someone says, but what's the Farm Stand? I haven't been to the Farm Stand. And if you go on Google and you Google the Farm Stand, you're not going to find it. If you look for restaurants that have closed in Steamboat, you're not going to find it there either. And what happened is that ChatGPT made this up completely. There is no restaurant in Steamboat called the Farm Stand. There never has been a restaurant. There may never be one. And the idea here is that it was given a task, right? Give me a list of farm-to-table restaurants in Steamboat. And we don't have that many farm-to-table restaurants. So it tried to create sentences that it thought were the most likely to be accurate based on the question that we gave it. But remember, it doesn't have any requirement to use facts. It doesn't even know what a fact is. So what you have to be really careful about with ChatGPT is when you ask it a question on a topic that you don't know anything about, it may generate answers that are completely 100% false. And this is where the high school students' eyes get really wide and they go, oh my gosh, I do have to read the textbook on, the French Civil War, or else I won't have any idea if what it's telling me in my made-up essay is true or not. And this is a fundamental limitation to this entire technology. So these are called hallucinations. And there's such an issue that ChatGPT has a warning on it every time you use it. So the old warning said on the top here that it may produce inaccurate information about people, places, or facts. And the new warning just says ChatGPT can make mistakes. Consider checking important information. And the rate at which it makes mistakes is a topic that academic researchers are spending significant time working on. But the short answer is, depending on the topic area, it's between kind of 2 and 25%. So it's wrong pretty often. So if you are using ChatGPT to plan your next trip to Moab, and it recommends this awesome mountain biking trail that you can't find on all trails, it may not be real. So it has an enormous power, and we're gonna talk in a minute about the use cases where it is extraordinarily powerful. But if you're using it with no guardrails, so to speak, you can get yourself in trouble pretty quickly if you are looking at information that you are not knowledgeable about. right? So if you are using ChatGPT to research a medical condition and you are not a medical doctor, you may get into trouble. If you are looking, as like I mentioned, with high school kids trying to figure out how to write your essay, you might get yourself in a lot of trouble. However, if you are a business owner, or if you have a specific role and you're using ChatGPT as a coach or as a partner to help you become more efficient and effective, but you're an expert in this topic, that's where it can be extraordinarily valuable. When we start thinking about the use cases going forward on how can these tools help us today. So let me just pause there for a second. Any questions or comments so far? Dakota, yeah, please.
I've given everyone permission to talk, so you're just gonna have to unmute yourself, Dakota.
Thank you.
And yeah, there you go.
Thank you. I can't see myself, so I wasn't aware of that. I'm particularly interested in learning more about DALL-E, and I wondered if you would be touching on that during your presentation, and whether or not it uses a large language model, and how you know, what its technology does differently compared to the text generation models that you're speaking of.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will definitely touch on DALL-E. I'm going to run through 2 more slides, and then we're going to get into use cases, and I'm happy to do a DALL-E use case. And if you have a very specific one in mind, I'm happy to reach. I'll poke at you again, Dakota, when I get there.
Thank you.
And we can talk about that specifically. Any other questions at this point?
It doesn't look like it, Skylar.
Okay, excellent, wonderful. Excellent. So then just to summarize before we jump into use cases, what we've talked about with this technology is that these large language models are trained from a huge selection of text, and they are trying to predict the next word. That's the underlying sort of mission that they have. And like our beloved, Snow Yeti, sometimes it just makes things up. And if you aren't knowledgeable on a topic, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble very, very quickly. So what I want to do is to just spend, let's see, I want to share one more slide, and then we can talk about specific use cases. So the question really is, okay, this technology exists now. How is it changing the business landscape? And what's come out recently is a study done by Boston Consulting Group. So Boston Consulting Group is one of the quote unquote big 3, along with McKinsey and Bain. They're basically an organization of really smart people who are hired typically by the Fortune 500 and by governments to answer tricky questions. Should Coca-Cola release a new product? Should NASA continue to invest in private businesses and no longer build their own rockets? Like big, meaty, strategic questions. And they hire some of the best and brightest out of the top MBA and PhD programs across the country. It's considered, an absolute premier role if you can get one, extremely competitive. And what BCG did is they took their incoming class of new consultants. So these are folks with recent MBAs, and they broke them into 2 groups. One of the groups, they gave the same real tasks and real training that they've been doing for years. And they figured out there's roughly 14 different kinds of tasks that their consultants do, whether that's doing market research or building PowerPoint decks or figuring out how to convince a CEO to take a specific position. And then the other half of their incoming class, they gave access to ChatGPT. And for some of them, they also gave them some more specific training. And what was fascinating are, for these tasks, across all the tasks, the folks who had access to ChatGPT, they completed more of them. They did them more quickly. And most amazingly, most amazingly in my opinion, they created 40% higher quality results. So basically across any way you would slice it, the sort of AI-empowered consultants were outperforming the regular consultants. And what this sort of the take-home message here is, in any kind of role where you are a knowledge worker or you're doing, sort of quote unquote white collar tasks that require thinking and strategy and cognitive effort, ChatGPT and tools like it are going to become the status quo. So similar to things like email, like Slack in a lot of corporate settings, like PowerPoint, in my opinion, and in those many of the leaders in this space, these AI tools and the ability to use them are going to become effectively requirements in order to be productive and successful in your role. So you've probably heard a lot of the idea that AI is taking our jobs. My personal opinion is that AI is not going to take your job. But that someone who knows how to use AI better than you may be taking your job. So what this means is that all of us have this opportunity, and the world is changing quickly, but I'd say you got a couple years to really think about what role you have today, what role you are looking to grow into, what company you work for or what company you run, how can that company be more successful, take on more market share, bring in more revenue, be more cost efficient, and how can AI help you do that? Because in my opinion, across just about every single vertical in every single industry, an AI-empowered human is going to be better, faster, and more efficient at doing that work going forward. So how do we use these tools? So let's jump into some specific use cases and kind of the three things to think about. And I think of this relative to using things like Google. If you're going to be using Google as a search engine or any other search engine, the three big differences between using Google and using ChatGPT are, the first is to offer context. Think of it more like training a new employee or training a new assistant than using a piece of technology, which is a weird thing to say, but the idea here is that the more time you spend helping it learn what you want and who you are, the better results you're going to get. So the more context you provide, the more examples you provide, the better the feedback, the better the information coming out of these tools is going to be. And similarly, unlike Google, where like Google has really figured out, like you type in something, you have a question, the first result is almost always the best one. The days of us scrolling through like 10 pages of search results are almost never, ever happen. But with ChatGPT and its other sister technologies, you typically, the first result is not going to be the best one. And the more you spend interacting with it, think of it like I said, like training a new employee. They may do an okay job the first time, but the more you coach them, the better you're going to get, the better results you're going to get, and the less work you're going to have to put in the future. So what I thought we could do, here are three example use cases that I was going to talk through, but this is where the floor is really open to all of you. So if we will definitely do a DALL-E example with Dakota, but if other folks have specific use cases, and I'm talking like really specific, like I own the bagel company in town and I'm trying to figure out a new marketing approach because XYZ isn't working. Or in HR at Yampa Valley Medical, and I'm trying to figure out how to write policy around using AI in the workplace. Like, if you all have really specific examples that you would love help figuring out the first step, this is your opportunity. So I will pause for a second. If anyone has thoughts they want to share now, please do. Otherwise, we'll run through a couple of use cases and I'll open the floor up again for other examples.
Any questions? You could put them in the chat or unmute. I'm not seeing any, Skylar.
Okay, no worries. We can make this like a real college lecture and I can start calling on people. But
I know. Don't be
I
shy.
won't do that yet. Mainly because that was my least favorite part about being in school, was getting called on. So I try to almost never apply social pressure on folks, even when you're all off video, so all's well. Okay, so why don't we draft a job description, and then Dakota, we'll jump into Dolly. That sounds good? So what, as I mentioned, what ChatGPT is really good for is providing, think of it as like a first pass text, and particularly in a topic area where you have some expertise, right? So let's say that, let's see, I own a small business in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. I am looking to hire a new marketing manager. This person needs to be able to handle both traditional and online media. They can work remotely. They need 5+ years experience. Please draft a job description for this role. Okay, so I gave a little bit of context here, not a whole lot, but a starting point. And let's see what we get. So the first thing I notice here is the format, right? So ChatGPT has read 100 billion job descriptions online, and it's creating the format for us. So it's not just dumping text out. It's not just giving you bullet points. It's giving you a format that you could almost copy and paste and put directly on Indeed or LinkedIn and start to post. And and that's because of the nature of it. Once again, trying to predict the next word, right? So what do we got here? We have a job description, we have a little bit about our company, and we have some responsibilities and requirements. So this is a situation where you could then literally, you could take this, you could copy and paste it, you could dump it into Google Docs or Microsoft Word, and you can edit it. And the idea here that I really wanted to bring home is one use case that's really powerful with these tools is what I think of as like the blank page. So if you have a situation where you're going to open up Google Docs and you're staring at a blank cursor and you're thinking about what am I going to start with? That's a situation where it's 95% of the time going to be beneficial to start in a tool like ChatGPT instead. So whether it is drafting a job description, drafting an email, drafting an Instagram reel or a post. All of these situations are powerfully augmented by a tool like ChatGPT. And it might be that it gets your brain going and you go, okay, you know what? This doesn't really match my voice. I don't really want to use these words exactly. But it's a way to start. If you work at a large organization and you have existing job descriptions, what you could do is you could say, ChatGPT, I'm going to give you 10 job descriptions that I've already created so you can understand the voice of my company. And then I want you to create a job description for a marketing manager. And you would just copy and paste directly into the chat window here, those 10 job descriptions. And then it would leverage that information to be able to build out a job description that more closely matched the voice of your organization. If you think about this at scale, if you are a very, very large organization and you are hiring hundreds of people and you have thousands of job descriptions, there are what are called API or data connection versions of ChatGPT that are available for large enterprise. So what you would do is, instead of using the free version of ChatGPT here, you would set up an account with Microsoft or Google, whichever organization your IT department has a relationship with, and you would create basically a connection to your data center or to your data store that's automatic. And then ChatGPT could pull all of those thousands of job descriptions that exist already without you having to copy and paste things. You could take it a step further and save that sort of context as your own GPT. So as an HR executive, you could have a version of ChatGPT that has already learned all of your job descriptions that your company has ever created. You could also give it all the resumes, and you could give it all of the resumes of the folks who you ended up hiring. And you could create a GBT or a AI or a coach that could help you as a HR department understand how to generate job descriptions, how to evaluate resumes, and how to take a lot of the manual effort out of the hiring process. And this is something, I have companies that I'm working with currently who are doing this. This is not science fiction. This is not the future. This is technology that is being used today and has been used for the last 6 to 12 months to be able to really make HR departments far more efficient when you are trying to move a large number of roles and a large number of candidates through the pipeline.
Skylar,
So
we
let's
do
get-
have one question on
Yeah,
the
please.
Q&A. So at One Steamboat Place, this person's from One Steamboat Place, and they're looking at Oracle Opera for running AI room assignments and tracking and logging incidents. And so there's not really a question, but that's what it says. I just posted it for you. So yeah,
Cool.
at One Steamboat Place and is looking for Oracle Opera from running AI room assignments and tracking logging incidents.
Yep. Yeah, I am
Joey,
not.
you can talk if you want.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Is there a specific question or just a comment on the technology?
I'm not sure.
More of a comment on the technology of what's happening within PMS or property management software.
Mhm.
I know a lot of the local lodging authorities been looking at kind of, as I agree with you on the premise that AI can enhance employment, but we also know that within the constructs of Steamboat, particularly for housing, it is really hard to get some basic tasks completed. And finding employees to do that and not valuing them to do something else, because there's something I would much rather my staff do than logging certain small tasks or compliance based. So I guess part of it too is just which AI is going to reign supreme. I kind of see it as a battle of the juggernauts for a little bit, how do you view that? Is it going to be Opera coming out with their version, Microsoft coming out with theirs, Elon with his, or will there be, the ultimate, and how that evolves, I guess, is the question for me.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think it's going to happen in phases. So the analogy that I would think of is when the internet first came out, if we can think back to what the world was like before the internet. And when the internet first came out, it was a tool that had a whole bunch of expensive hardware behind it, right? It was really infrastructure at that point. You could make a website, there was a little bit of email, but there wasn't a business or a use case yet that was defining what the value of this new technology. So what I would think of the stage we're at right now is think of it as all of these existing tech companies, these existing juggernauts are trying to build like their own internet, but they're all more or less the same, right? So Google, Microsoft, Dell, Oracle will definitely have their own. Salesforce, every incumbent is building one because they want you to keep on using their software and keep on using the suite of software they have available. But they're really just at the tool stage, right? This is really like really early stage. And then you think about when e-commerce came to the internet, all of a sudden this was hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of opportunity for a ton of new organizations that were created on top of the internet. And that's how I think AI is going to go. I think we're going to see a bunch of incumbents building infrastructure with all of these GBTs. But what we haven't seen yet is a new $100 billion company that has the quote unquote killer use case. What is the e-commerce equivalent for AI? And will it be, a single a single tool, or will it be something more like what Apple did with the App Store, where they said, we created this new community and all of you other folks can build your own apps and tools on top of that. And OpenAI, which creates ChatGPT, is trying to do that right now. But we are in the very, very early days as it relates to all of this AI work. It's sort of amazing, you know. It's been 55 years of development in AI, and in the last 18 months, it's taken off. But from a maturity perspective, this is still a very juvenile, very early stage technology. If that answers your question.
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. It's moving very quickly. I've given a version of this talk, I think 4 or 5 times in the last 9 months, and I've had to change out about half of the content because the technology keeps on changing underneath me. And that's a great segue to talk about DALL-E. So for those who are unfamiliar, DALL-E is an image generator. And DALL-E used to be its own separate tool, but in the last couple of months, it is now directly integrated into ChatGPT. So just to give you a feel of what this looks like, we'll just do something lighthearted here to get started. So let's see, create a picture of someone on a chairlift watching a webinar on AI in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. Okay, so it's going to give us 2 options. It's creating images. Images take a little bit longer to process. So here's our first option. And here's the second option. So one of the questions that Dakota had, and then Dakota, I'm gonna come back to you in a minute to get some clarification on what you were hoping to learn, was around if the technology behind DALL-E is, how is it similar or different from the text-based generation of ChatGPT? So fundamentally, the underlying mathematics is the same. And what that means is it's trying to, you know, create the next best word, but the next best word here is now a mathematical multidimensional vector that's focused on the pixels that are most likely to, you know, be next to each other based on the prompt. So the same underlying math, but a little more abstract in terms of how it's presented. What is interesting about the pictures, however, are that the hallucinations are often far easier to find. So for example, in the picture on the left, it looks pretty good. Oftentimes I see that chair lifts are facing the wrong direction. This person is obviously rotated very weirdly. That's not how a chair would actually be. But more obviously on the right-hand side, this person has a ski boot attached to a binding that has no ski, right? So the entire ski is missing. And that is just the algorithm, you know, not having any idea what a ski is. It just knows that a boot, you know, has a high probability of being in a binding, that has a high probability of being in a stick type thing. But it doesn't know that it has to have that for you to be sitting on a lift. So that's where the approach is a little bit different. What's also interesting, and this is specific to ChatGPT, is if I ask it for the same picture again, so if I say, you know, generate the same picture, but have the person wear a blue jacket. What's going to happen is you're not going to get the exact same picture because it's going to create from scratch the probabilistic map of generating the most likely next word that is represented in a picture. There are other technologies. So see, completely different angle, right? Everything in the picture has changed. The same idea is present, but from a artistic perspective, you know, we have a completely different image. There are solutions that are focused more on graphic design use cases. I know Adobe, the very famous software company for design, has a version of ChatGPT which does a much better job of holding context, meaning when you ask it to change the jacket to be blue, it'll keep most of this image the same and just change the jacket. And that's really in the last few months, they've been able to technically be able to do that. But let me pause there. Dakota, was there something specific that you were hoping to dig in on as it relates to DALL-E?
So my question was very similar to Joey's, but with the image-based technology, and that's just that I'm trying to evaluate different AI generators for image-based for my business, which is interior design. And trying to just we're in such early stages that everything's changing so fast. So it's really more about where is my time investment going to go for these different technologies that are evolving incredibly quickly. So it's just a little bit of, it's a kind of a race feel right now.
Yeah, and it's tricky as a business owner because you want to spend the time to invest in something and then not have to spend the time to invest in something different in the future.
Right.
And that's where, like exactly as you said, the technology is changing so quickly. And what's happening, as I mentioned, is some of the incumbents in the design space are starting to come out with tools that are more tailored for professionals like yourself. So if, for example, you were looking for an image generator to create a picture to go alongside a blog post or to go into a marketing campaign, and it didn't matter that the iterations changed every time you did it, then a tool like DALL-E, which is baked right into ChatGPT, it's included now, is a great tool. If you're looking for a tool that's going to be helpful with clients where you want to be able to visualize a living room, and then the client, says, "Oh, I want this couch instead of that couch." You're going to be looking for a solution that is able to hold on to that context much longer, and that's where tools like Adobe are better suited. There's probably 24 of them out there right now. I have not done the research in the last 6 weeks to know which of them is leading the market. But I do have some friends in the product design space who have been very happy with Adobe and what they have continued to develop. But I feel your pain when it comes to trying to make a business decision, knowing that the world is changing so quickly.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Excellent. Any other prospective use cases? Otherwise, I have one last example that I wanted to show you guys just to give you a different feel for how you could potentially use this technology. But I'm very happy to follow someone else's prompt if they have a focus area.
I'm not seeing any other questions, Skylar.
Okay, no worries. So what I want to do is just to give you a feel for a very different kind of way to interact with ChatGPT. So I'm just going to create a fresh window. So when you create a fresh window, it has no memory of what you have done previously. So also interestingly, if you spend all that time to enter all those job descriptions and then you close your window, you've lost all that history. That ability to hold on to context is one of the, I would say, major research areas within these AI tools right now. The amount of history they can hold on to has grown dramatically in the last 6 months, and that's an area where I expect things will improve. But for now, if you close the ChatGPT window, it is gone forever. So what I wanted to do was to think about using ChatGPT as a co-founder or as a business partner, and thinking about how you could potentially grow your business by having someone who you can quote unquote talk to about some of your out of the box ideas as it relates to growing your business. So if you say, let's just say, I'm a small business owner in Colorado. I own the pretzel shop. I don't think we have a pretzel shop in town. I own the pretzel shop in Steamboat Springs. I'm trying to decide the best ways to expand my business. Can you act as a business advisor and give me 3 ideas on how to grow my revenue? Okay, so very, not a lot of context, not a lot of information off the top. So let's see where we start with. Okay, seasonal and local flavors, craft beer, cheeses, herbs, online sales in delivery or catering. Okay, so let's say I'm interested in learning more about online sales. Where would I start? Can you create a business plan and estimate costs to set up an online store for my pretzel business? And the idea here is that, if you are the business owner, you are an expert in your company, but you may not be an expert in kind of the related opportunity spaces, right? The adjacent situations. And where ChatGPT can be really helpful is to just be a creative thought partner, right? It's never going to judge you. It's never going to tell you your idea is silly. It's never going to say, just be happy with what you have. Don't dream so big. And it can give you kind of an ability to take that first step or that second step and start to say, okay, if I was curious about this, like, how would I even start? And it may not be able to tell you, exactly which vendors could help you or what the exact costs are, but it's going to give you an order of magnitude understanding of how long things are going to take, right? 3 months for development and testing, a rough sense of website development, total initial investment. And if you had no idea who to talk to, if you didn't know how to begin some of these conversations, then ChatGPT is a great way to sit on your laptop and have a cup of coffee and dream a little about how to change your business, how to change your role within your business in a setting where there's absolutely no, consequence of an idea that may not be great. So that's where I am going to stop. We have a couple of minutes if there's any more questions. And I just wanted to end to say thank you to everyone. And I do run a consulting business. I am available if there are things here that were interesting that you want to go deeper on, or you think there's an opportunity to really leverage AI within your business or curious how you could do that. I would be happy to continue the conversation. So thank you all for joining today.
Thank you so much, Skylar. And if anyone has any questions or wants to follow up on this, we did record this, so we will be sharing this with all of you. Again, before we hop off, I do want to thank our sponsors. Oh, thanks, Kim. Kim had a comment. Thank you. This was so helpful. I do want to thank our sponsors again, our presenting sponsor, Mountain Valley Bank, and then our other sponsors, Northwest Data Services, UC Health, Yampa Valley Medical Center, Air Academy Credit Union, and the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority. And thank you. Thanks again.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.